Hi, I'm Kelly at Book and Paper Arts, and today I'm going to talk about how to make paste paper. Paste papers are art papers that are easy to make. The possibilities of how you can play with them are almost endless, and best of all, you can make them with supplies that you probably already have. And if you don't, you can get them easily. So it just makes it a really, really fun, beautiful project. Paste paper making has been around for over 350 years. And the technique that I'm going to show today would be almost exactly the same one that they used back then. I really love creating with a technique that is like that makes me feel connected to creators from that far back and their love for paper and book arts. Back in the day, these kinds of papers would have been used for everything from playing cards to wallpaper. But primarily they were used in bookbinding and bookmaking for end papers and also for covers. I'm definitely going to be using mine is in art journals. I'm going to be binding them in, using them as covers, but you could also use these for making cards, scrapbooks, collage, fodder, so many ways that you can use these art papers. If you like journal arts, book and paper arts, and vintage books, paper, and other ephemera, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and be sure and turn on the notifications. And you will have more of them in your life. Let's go make some paper. The materials are simple. Some homemade paste, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Something to add color with. I'm using acrylic paint. You're going to need some big brushes, these are cheap ones, and some paper. Finally, something to make patterns with, some combs, some mark making things, some rubber stamps, some cards are good, and other whatnot. What paper you use depends on your style and what you've got. So you're going to have to experiment and see what makes you happy. After doing this for years, I really like this lighter paper. It's not watercolor paper, it's a sketch pad weight. And it's quite a bit lighter than watercolor paper. Partly this is because once you add this thick layer of paste and it dries, this paper is going to become a lot sturdier, a lot more robust. So there's no need to start with a heavy paper unless that's your style. So trial and error. But if you've got a lighter paper, try that. As I said, these brushes are dead cheap. They were 3 for £2 in Poundland. And you don't want to use your fine art brushes for the paste. Just get something nice and friendly and cheap. For color, you can use a variety of pigments or tempera. I'm using acrylic. And again, these are not really expensive. You don't have to use your fine art acrylics in this. So if you've got some children's acrylics or just cheap ones from the discount craft store, that's going to do the job. I do have a couple of fancy ones. I'm going to play with those too. For making your patterns, as you'll see when we get there, you can use a variety of combs. And I just collect these and keep them on hand in different widths. Here's some really skinny ones. This was from a kid's clay making set. And it makes these roly pattern things. You're going to find that old plastic cards are really fun to work with. I got this at a hardware store. I don't know what it's for, but when I asked the guy if I could have it, he said yes. So just keep your eyes open for fun things to make marks with. For the paste, I made my paste from cornflour. That's the same thing as cornstarch in the States, the stuff you make gravy with. And mine is 2 parts cornstarch to 8 parts water. It's super easy to make. It takes 2 minutes. I posted a video here on YouTube a few days ago about how to make homemade paste for paper projects. And if you missed it, I'll put the link to that video in the text box below this one. So you can go back and see that short tutorial on how to make paste. I'll also put the recipe for the paste in this text box, so you don't have to take notes just yet. If you don't have cornstarch or cornflour, you can use wheat to make a wheat paste. That is just plain old flour. I don't have a recipe, but if you go online and you search for wheat paste recipe or wheat paste for paste paper, you're going to find a ton of ideas and recipes there. Another option for paste is wallpaper paste. It's it's a methyl cellulose. I have not used this, but I've seen tutorials that did with good results. It's very inexpensive and easy to find. So think about that. When I made my paste with the cornstarch, and people ask me why I use this instead of wheat paste. I don't remember. I've been making these for almost 10 years, and it's the one I've always used. I don't know. If it ain't broke. I add to this recipe, the only difference is I add a bit of alum. Alum is a mordant, and a mordant is used in ink making and dye making to help your substrate grab the color. If you add a mordant to your dyes, or in this case to your paste paint, it's going to make it easier for the paper to grab the color and hold the color. It will also make it more light fast, and that color will last longer. Now here's the deal. It's completely optional, especially if you're just doing this for fun or to get started. Don't not make this because you don't have any alum on hand. But if you find that you do like this technique, think about it in the future, adding a half teaspoon of alum to your paste as a mordant for more pop. To mix up the paste with your color, I have these, I sort of hoard these yogurt jars. They come in really handy. Let's see. I'm going to put some of my paste in here. How much? I don't know. Some. I'm guessing that's about a quarter of a cup, a third of a cup-ish. And then I'm going to add paint. How much? Some. 1, 2, maybe like 2 tablespoons. I like a lot of color. By far the best way to figure out your ratio is trial and error. But start that, maybe with a quarter cup, third of a cup of paste and a couple of tablespoons of color. This is pretty lumpy. I don't care. If you were going to do this for a fine art project, you might want to strain your paste so that it's very fine. In all the years I've been doing this, the lumps have never bothered me. So see what you think. Don't be scared of them if you have some bumps to start with. But do make sure that your color is mixed very evenly. Now for the part you've all been waiting for, the fun part. We're going to start painting and making patterns in our paste and our papers. First, add a layer of water. You can use a sponge, or you can soak your papers, but I've just gotten mine damp with some water on a brush. Now take your paste paper and just paint it on to your page. You can see this is a little translucent. That's okay. Add a few more layers. There are also some lumps in here, some clumps. Those are pretty much going to brush out. So don't get too anxious if you have a lump or two. The first technique I'm going to show is combing. And as I said, I've got a variety of combs with different widths and looks to them. But you just want to start getting in there with whatever you've got and working your comb in. You can go crossways like that. Cool. Now, one thing that it's really great about paste paper is if you're not really satisfied, you can just smooth it out and start again with the same piece of paper. So let's try it with just plain up and down. That's already really effective. And you can cross comb. Let's see. That's looking really good. Should we go mad? Yeah, and you can see it's kind of psychedelic. It's moving it around. But again, if you're not happy with it, just paint over it. Try it a different way. Okay, it's what we started with a minute ago. And you know what? Now I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight here. I'm just going to use my finger. Wear gloves if you don't want to get smushy. I can't be bothered. Let's see. I like that. You could connect the dots. And as you're starting to see, these are going to be just so many ways you can keep messing with that. Let's see, let's try this narrow comb. Similar but different. It looks like waves. I like that. A traditional way of decorating your paste paper is to just paint layers on either side of two pieces of paper and then fold them together. And then, let's see. You don't have to get a really tight seal. If you do, your paint will squish out anyway. Again, trial and error. And now open it up. And you will see a pattern that to me looks almost like stucco. It's called veining, making veins in your paper. I call it pulled work. It's very traditional, and the results are different every time, but it's going to give you texture and layer and pop. Here's a variation on that where I've got one side one color and then a contrasting color on the other side. then pull. Wow. Look at that. You've got the blue paint that's actually pooling into some of the veins there. And the green paint here doing the same. It's very subtle and very effective. From here, we can add some more layer. I'm taking a contrasting color and just putting little blobs of it here and there. Now let's see how this works. Okay. Just smoothing it out. Don't worry about that. Nobody's going to see it. Yowza. That is fun. Now you remember I said that a card can be a really good tool here. So look at this. It's really making quite a bit of negative space with a pattern here. And you could also do a thin line like this. So you can see how you can have so much fun just using an old card. But I really do kind of like that simple basket weave. If you have any rubber stamps, this might be a good place to try them. I don't have them inked up or anything. I'm just going to use them to make a pattern here, where some of my pieces are connecting. So we just have a little bit of a floral there. See how that looks. Let's try it with the card again. This time I'm just pulling it and making thin ribbon-like lines. You can see how this can be meditative. It definitely wakes up your hand and mind to patterns. Traditionally, you don't do a lot of color mixing. It's just not that kind of a medium. But media. But I have put down a layer of green and a layer of blue. They are both still wet, and I've not worked them into each other because they're wet and it'll get messy. I mean, sludgy. But I want you to see that you can, by doing this, you're mixing in the colors a little, but you're also revealing what's underneath. And now I'm going to go into that and add some more of those thin lines. So the idea is that you can just build texture on texture. It's so forgiving. Let's try it with some stencil work. I love stencils so much. This is just a wet layer of 2 or 3 layers of the wet green. I'm going to put my stencil on top. And now I'm going to remove some of the color. I'm using a makeup sponge, but you could use a kitchen sponge, or you could use a paper towel, cloth, whatever you've got. And I'm just lifting off this color through the stencil. I got this stencil cheap at a big box store when I was visiting my family in Mississippi. So easy to find. You can do so much with them. They are so versatile. How's that? Okay. So I'm going to pull this. And hey presto. That actually looks just like a beautiful wallpaper. Let's go down and look at that. And no one will know how you made it, unless you tell them. Here's another version. I've done the same thing where I pulled, this is a stencil with the wet paste, and I've pulled up in between with a sponge. Now I'm going to leave it there very carefully and go over it with a contrasting color. Let's see. There we go. Ready? Now that is what I call a fun page. Something that we have that the Moravian Church did not have in the 1700s is bubble wrap. See what happens. I've got a layer of several layers of wet paste here. I'm going to work this on. You have to use quite a bit of pressure here. This is not, otherwise it'll be too subtle. And my point kind of is, look around you. What's in your workspace? What's in your kitchen? Wherever, for everyday objects for mark making. Let's see, let's add to that a little bit with some more stamping. This, again, I don't have any color on it. If you are going to use a stamp, it's better to use something super simple. Something that needs a lot of contrast isn't going to show up. The detail, I mean. Let's do some as if they're flying away. Here I'm using that thin comb again. And I'm just making a kind of a basket weave pattern. That's already looking nice. And I'm just going to add a little bit of some more dots. You could, of course, use some stamping. Now, how about this? I have put down a layer of blue and then a splotchy layer of red. They're both still wet. There's some lumps here. They're going to come out when I start working it. It's fine. So I'm using my card. It's a pretty simple pattern. Looks like a wave. But what it's doing is it's working with the colors to show what's underneath and blending them just a little. Heavens to Betsy, I have a lot to play with now. As I said, there are so many ways that you can use these papers. They could be the beginning of a collage, the background for a collage piece. Let's see, that looks good. Whoa. You could use them as collage fodder. Tear them up and then make an abstract piece. If you have a friend who loves paper, a stack of these would make a delightful gift. I'd love to get that. I'm going to definitely be binding these into some art journals. I like this size. One side would be decorative, and then when you open it up in your journal, you'd be able to write and draw on the blank side. If you have any ideas, any questions, or feedback, please add it to the comments below here, and we can all read them and compare notes and be the more creative for it. Please join me in a few days because I have a new video on illustrated journal keeping, visual diary pages. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Until later, happy making.